So welcome everyone. So we've got an amazing event lined up for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the Olympics, the most recent Olympics in Tokyo, and what that means for Israeli society, and maybe some of the things that we can take out of the Olympics in Israeli society. I'm just going to give everyone a brief rundown of what's been happening so far in the Olympics, because for those that don't know, it's actually the most successful Olympics that Israel has ever had. So I'm going to read here. I apologize. So Tokyo 2020 has been Israel's best Olympics so far, pretty much from every single aspect. 90 athletes across 15 different sports. It's the biggest team and the biggest delegation that Israel has ever sent to the Olympics. It's double the size of the delegation that Israel had in 2016. They've won 4 medals as compared to the 2, which is the record, which was the record prior. 2 gold medals. Up until this point, Israel has only won 1 gold medal in 2004 in Athens, and they've won 2 gold medals at this Olympics. So we've got Artem Dolgopiat, who is the artistic gymnast, and he won for the floor exercises. We had Linaya Shalam in the rhythmic gymnastics, and the Israeli delegation also made 18 finals. So significantly more, almost double the previous record. So definitely a successful Olympic Games for the Jewish nation. And what we're very lucky to do tonight is to speak about the Olympics and what it might mean for Israeli society. Usually I am the moderator for these kind of events, but tonight I'm handing over that to another person. We have Aya from the AZYC, so thank you, Aya, for coming. I'm going to hand it over to her and let her take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name's Aya. I'm from the AZYC, as Joey said, and I'm here to moderate the panel. And so we have 2 people with us today. We have Sefi and Motty. So I'm just going to read a quick little bio of them. So Sefi Shalam is an avid sports fan and was fortunate enough to have many professional links to his hobby, mainly in his 2 of his previous jobs. The first is that he worked at an Israeli sports channel for 3 years as a reporter and in production roles, focusing mainly on Olympic sports. And the second is that as part of his job at the American Embassy in Israel, he created the embassy's sport diplomacy activities that included peace building and cooperation with the NBA. Apart from watching sports, he really loves the connection between sports, society, and politics, and plans to establish a charity in Israel, which will use sports as a social tool. And second, we've got Motty Goodman, who is Jewish Agency's Shaliach to B'nai Akiva Australia. He grew up in the settlement of Peduel and was involved in many sports since his childhood as a competitor and as a fan. He graduated at Ariel University with a degree in psychology and a certificate of teaching, and he worked as the head of informal education for the municipality of Samaria. Motty has a borderline addiction to all possible sports, from soccer and basketball to couples sheshbesh. As a child, he knew by heart the sizes of shoes and the dates of birth of all the players of the Israeli Soccer Premier League, and since arriving in Australia, he's become a big fan of footy and the Essendon Bombers. With rugby rules, he is still struggling, so if anyone wants to offer, Motty is keen for help. So yeah, you guys can say hi now if you'd like. Cool. So let's start off by just hearing from you guys how it's felt to watch Israel's most successful Olympics so far.
Yeah, I'll let you start. Obviously, you chose the better team. I chose St. Kilda.
So in terms of the Olympic Games, we didn't choose. It was just we born to be Israelis. So I guess we had the privilege to go for the same team, Team Israel. It was really exciting. I sat here with my kids watching when we could, not on Shabbat. And we didn't really believe we were going to reach so many medals. 4 medals for us is a lot. And time after time, especially with the gold medals, we had the right to stand and sing a tikva. And I was in tears. It was really, really moving and exciting. And yeah, looking forward to many more in the future.
Yeah, I felt pretty much the same. Together with Motty and 2 other shlichim, we have our WhatsApp group chat where we speak about sports, and we also subscribe to the service where you can watch Israeli TV. So we could watch all the Olympics in Hebrew and watch, everything live with the interviews and everything in Israel. And it was really exciting. The amount of times that I shouted here. I have a baby who is 9 months old, and my wife Sarah came to me on last Sunday And she's upset with me and like, you woke him up with your screaming. I don't care. Artyom Dolgobiadze just won a gold medal. He can go back to sleep, but we have a gold medal. So yeah, that's what we went through. And I assume something in the thousands of messages on WhatsApp about the Olympics. Because it's very weird to watch it alone at home.
Absolutely. It's very exciting to be still a part of it and still be able to listen to everything in Hebrew and feel a part of the Israeli Olympic spirit. On a more somber note, how did it feel to see an official acknowledgement of wow, my speech is a bit weird today, sorry. How did it feel to watch the official acknowledgement of the Munich Games in 1972 in the opening ceremony?
I think Motty didn't watch it live because it was Friday night. I watched it, and they didn't say that it was going to happen. Even in the general rehearsal the night before, they didn't mention it. It was a complete surprise. And I was watching it and I was shocked. And I texted in the group chat of all the shlichim saying, wow, listen, I think that they've just acknowledged the massacre from Munich for the first time. I was personally shocked. I think it's beautiful. It should have been done 50 years ago. Better late than never, or 49 years ago. But yeah, I think it was a very important thing to do. So far, they've been trying to just hide it somewhere in the corner of the Olympic Village, have a tiny ceremony.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I don't understand why it didn't happen before. There is no real reason. Like, it's not even political. It was like good and bad were very clear back then. And I think against all of us as Jews, it wasn't in Israel. It's nothing against Zionism. It was like, I don't know. So it is a shame that it didn't happen before. But yeah, as Sefi said, at least it happened now. So better now than never.
Absolutely. I think that it was really important that they finally acknowledged such a, horrible day in history. On a note on the Israeli team, do you think it's reasonable to call them an Israeli team? Do they really represent Israel?
Yes. I mean, what do you need to represent the country? Let's think not about Israel. If you're representing Australia, you need to be Australian citizen. You need to wear like the Australian uniform to be proud to represent Australia, to use the flag when you're winning. And I guess all of them were very proud to represent Israel. I guess it became more controversial in two different areas. One, it's when people that actually not living in Israel, like our baseball team, all of them are fully American, all Jews. So it was very easy to give them citizenship. And then they represented us. But I'm saying, I want to say, let's have more people that not living in Israel representing us. Like if you are proudly wearing, the Israeli uniform, blue and white, kachol lavan, singing a tikva if you're winning, you are part of us. And if that's another way to connect the Jews that not living in Israel and making them like a stronger part of Israel, they're not representing the diaspora. It's not the Maccabiyah. Representing the state of Israel, very clear. You're all welcome, guys. If some of you are talented enough, I'm inviting you all. Let's do it.
I have a somewhat different view. I first of all, I think that this team definitely represents Israel in general. Also, we might speak about it later, might not, but we do have many different walks of life. We do have a few missing. There were not a single Arab and not a single religious Jew in the team for different reasons that we can mention later if you want. I do think that there is a border where if you have nothing to do with Israel or almost nothing to do with Israel, you just happen to represent us. We were there 30, 40, 50 years ago when we weren't good enough. We needed favors from others. We're not there anymore. I assume that currently There are discussions in America, in the Jewish community. Wow, that made us really proud. Look at how we supported Israel and had American baseball players playing, Jewish American baseball players representing Israel. I personally don't think that we need that anymore. If you don't want to come and live in Israel, we do have people, swimmers, for example, who study in a college in the US. It's different because Israel is their home. They just study in the US or compete there. But if Israel isn't your home, well, don't just come to us because you couldn't go get into the American team.
I think that the Olympics always raises really interesting questions around nationality and what it means to belong to a nation, especially because you go and you represent the country through, anthem and flag and costume and literally representing the country. So I think it's really interesting, Motty, what you're saying about anyone can represent any country as long as they want to, because that's a really interesting take on nationality.
Yeah, but I'll be very strong against someone who is not Jewish and don't have Israel-like citizenship. So it's not just happen to be good in sport and happy to represent Israel. Guys, they are Jews. They all halachic, not halachic, whatever. That's another argument. But they all connected to us. We are one. Like I'll be very much, and maybe we'll discuss it again about someone who is not Jewish, but wants to represent Israel. I'll have not a bigger problem, but I think it's more of an issue than someone who is fully Jewish and fully wants and happy to represent Israel, blue and white. I do want them to come to Israel. I will be very happy if they're making Aliyah, but I'm saying if they are not, at least we have this connection. So I just wanted to add, they are not happen to be good in sport. Right. They also happen to be Jews.
So,
by the way, we had some of our best athletes in the past were not Jewish in any way. Alex Averbuch in pole vault. For years, he was our best athlete. He represented Israel with the flag on his chest and a cross on his neck.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think that there's, on one hand, there's the Israeli population that isn't Jewish, right? And then there's this diaspora Jewry who we obviously feel very connected to Israel and very, directly in relationship with it. But to have us represent everyone, to represent the Israeli nation, I think is a different thing. And I think that's a really interesting distinction. I don't know, like, would what sort of thing would happen if, who could represent the US at the Olympics other than US Americans? You know what I mean?
I think it's also important to say, I'm not saying that they don't have the right to represent Israel, but like, go to Becky in Bet Weizmann. She'll help you do properly Aliyah, move to Israel and represent Israel from Israel. But about the baseball team specifically, I think it was Eldad, the JNF Shaliach, who asked after the Olympics, after they were eliminated, are they now flying to Israel or to the US? If the answer is to the US, if you've just finished representing Israel in the Olympics and you fly directly back to the US, after you didn't come through Israel, they flew from the US to Tokyo, from Tokyo to the US. Well, I think there's an issue here.
Okay, so you need to feel some degree of home in the place that you're representing.
In my job at the American Embassy, I got to meet this baseball team. I think it was 2016. They organized some kind of a birthright trip for them. Guys, you need to come and visit the country that you're about to represent. And 90% of them, that was their very first time in Israel. They came for a week to see this is the country that you're about to represent.
And that feels wrong to you.
And I want to say, if we can get more people to visit Israel and to know Israel better, I don't care about the sport, yeah? Baseball is nice. Some people can argue, but we got more people connected to Israel because of this. We got more American Jews watching and saying, El Israel, we want Israel to win. The sport is really not like winning. He's saying they happen to be good in sport. For me, I'm happy to lose or not to win, like 4 medals, for example, and to have more people connected, not just to their Jewish identity, but also to their Israeli part or Zionist part. And this is like, when I'm prioritizing, this is higher than the Olympics or winning.
Right, so, but they're supporting Israel in a very, I I don't know, they're just saying it. They don't necessarily support Israel as a country. They support Israel, the team. And maybe that does connect them to Israel. But does it mean anything if they don't end up seeing Israel or moving there?
So obviously it's way less. It's just 1 week or 2 weeks and that's it. I want to say that's something. Because if you represent the country, if someone, let's say, is anti-Zionist, he wouldn't wear the blue and white. He wouldn't say Israel is. It's starting a movement of connection, and I think let's get more people represent. Like Maccabiah is for example, a great way, and many Australians will come to Israel. Sport is just a way for me. Sport is not the target itself. It's not the goal. Okay. Sport is another way to connect people, and if the connection is not only between people, but also between people to the land of Israel, that's the highest goal we can achieve.
Great. I want to move on to another topic that Sefi, you already touched on, the idea that the Israeli team, the team that represented Israel had no Arabs or Orthodox Jews represented within them. Can you guys tell me about why this is the case or what you think about this?
Yeah, I assume that Motty it will be easier for him to explain why religious Jews aren't represented. I'm not an Arab, but I can try and explain. So since the 1952 Helsinki was the first Olympics that Israel participated on, since then we've had hundreds of athletes. 2 of them were Arabs. The last Arab who represented Israel was Jimmy Turk, a soccer player in 1976 in Montreal. That's it. Now, there are plenty of reasons. A lot of them can teach us a lot about the Arab society in Israel in general. One of them is infrastructure. There is not a single, even, I wouldn't just say like a track and field stadium or facility in an Arab city. There is nothing even remotely close to that. They have far less different facilities, gyms and things like that, where they can practice. Almost like there are barely any swimming pools, definitely not Olympic swimming pools in the Arab society. They're very good at soccer. They're pretty good at boxing and weightlifting, which are Olympic sports, but they never get to the level that is needed for that. Also, a big issue is the chicken and egg. If no Arabs are going to the Olympics, they never have the role models to try and be like, I want to be like that person. What I personally think that Israel should do about it is, before the Rio Olympics, the Israeli Olympic Committee said, we have a goal. We want to have a female winning a medal for the first time since 1992. And they achieved it. In this one, they had different goals. One of them was, we want to win at least one gold medal, at least one medal in a field where we didn't win any medals so far. I think that they need to say for LA 2028, because for Paris in 3 years, it will be too short. For LA in 2028, we want to have 2 or 3 Arabs as a part of the delegation. I think that it's definitely doable. There are talents. It just takes a lot of effort to bring them in.
Absolutely. Motty?
I wanted to suggest at the beginning, Sefi, maybe I can speak on behalf, not on behalf, but to explain the Arab reasons, and you can go for the
religious. Speak about it. I can if you want. I can.
Yeah, but I cannot represent everyone. I can only speak on behalf of myself. I want to say that, I don't know, in my family, no one likes or watching or interested in sport like I am. It's quite unique. And I think it is explaining a little bit, not the whole picture, but I think, I don't know, going to a religious school since I was born, and we always played lots of sport. I went to a soccer and judo and basketball, whatever, everything, but it was never even an option to be a professional. A, because it's really hard, I'm gonna say it in a second, but B, because again, prioritizing our values, what you wanna do when you grow, what you wanna, so people speaking about things, I don't know, I grow up, my family, my Abba is educator, my Ima works with education. I grow up in this world, and sport is not a goal in itself. It can be a nice way to spend time. It can be a good hobby. My Abba used to be great in basketball, but it was never an option to grow up and be a professional player because you had better things to do in your life. So this is part A. and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but I do think it's a reason why many religious people not even trying. Maybe they are very talented and they will never know because this is not an option. And I think part B is obviously being religious, and you always have competitions on Shabbat. You always need to bring your food with you. It's really, really hard. We always had few here and there. We did have a religious basketball player came from Tamir Goodman. We are not family, not yours family as well, Aya, I think.
Yeah.
But he grew up the Jewish, Michael Jordan, and he ended up not so good. But he played in a college, and he played like as a pro for a league. We did have Batel Getrer, I think, Beijing. Sefi, correct me if I'm wrong, 2008. Yep. She was fully religious, and I think she knew if the competition will be on Shabbat, she'll need to choose. And I think the biggest story that we can speak about is about ones that didn't make it to the Olympics. It's Bitty Deutsch. She's an ultra-Orthodox. Go and Google it. She's amazing. She's mamash inspiring.
Crazy story.
Great story. She's like ultra-Orthodox. She's super short. She's like 150 centimeters. She didn't know she's so talented. She started to run when she was like 25 with few kids already. And she found out she's really good. And she started to compete and to be, I think she made it to like the qualification to go to the Olympics. And then she find out the first, like it's starting on Shabbat. And again, speaking about prioritizing values, I'm sure it was not a question for her. She said, Shabbat, that's a no-go. Olympics is amazing. Imagine to see like she's running with a skirt, with a shaitel, full on Haredi. And she wanted to come, but she said Shabbat is like, there is no question and I'm not going. I think she made her personal best like result when she was pregnant in like crazy story, go and Google it. Anyway, I'm saying it takes me back to sport is important. I find it like it's giving me a lot. I think there are great values we can learn and achieve, but there are many things that are higher. And this connection to Israel I spoke before, and for me, and I guess for some others, being a religious and keeping Shabbat or Kashrut and whatever, it's not two values that I need to make a decision. It's not even a question. And I think this is why many potential great athletes will never be even an option to go to the Olympics because they're not on the right track. Or I would say they are on the right track, which is not leading them to the Olympics.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's really interesting that these two sort of minorities are experiencing like not being represented at the Olympics in such different ways. The experiences and the reasons they're not getting there are very different, which I think is very interesting. So let's move on.
And also, sorry, I'll just add one last thing about it. The Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, apart from people like Bitty Deutsch, which is unique, generally don't even do sports almost at all. So it is important to remember when always we say, I'm one of the people who say that on medals per capita, we have one medal per 2.2 million people, which puts us somewhere, I think, in the 40th in the world or something like that. But we need to remember that Haredim and Arabs are simply not a part of it when we speak about Olympic sports. Which is also something we can learn about the society, because it's almost exactly as if when we're speaking about high tech, that those two groups are barely a part of it.
Right. Okay, interesting.
I wanted to add about Bitty Joyce. First of all, she made Aliyah from America. She's not like a fully classic, hardcore, ultra-Orthodox. I think it's different. She's coming from a more open mindset. It's not like Haredim not doing sport. They are playing soccer all over Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim, but it's not an option to be a professional because we want to learn Torah. We want to be Rabban. So again, prioritizing values, offer them, find someone who is talented enough, tell him, we're going to pay you, I don't know, 20,000 shekel a month, just be our Israeli representative for the next Olympics. He'll say, no, I'm representing Israel in the Beit Midrash. So, yeah. So, and it might be different from the Arab population, which is, it's completely different reasons why they're not part of it.
Absolutely. All right. So let's just move on to a different sort of topic. All of the medals won by Israel have been in individual sports, which is very different to Australia, where we have a large emphasis on team sports. Do you guys have anything to say about that or any insight as to the differences there?
I think to succeed in team sports, you need to have much more depth and much bigger and stronger tradition. In order to succeed, to get a gold medal in artistic gymnastics, you need one good Artem Dolgopiat, one. In order to achieve a medal in soccer, you need a really strong team. That's, I think, one of the biggest differences why we're much better in the individual sports.
Yeah, I just want to add, I don't think it's about the Israeli culture, because go to Israel, soccer is the most popular sport by far, even though our soccer is really boring and bad, but people like soccer. So the culture is around soccer and basketball first, not footy, but we are just not good enough. We always have one or two that can play. So if it was judo, they could represent us, Eran Zehavi or Eyal Berkovich. But as Sefi said, one is not enough to build a team. Yeah.
All right. So it's just sort of the fact that you guys have outstanding, athletes, but no teams that are all around incredible.
Judo now, in judo, we won the team competition. We won the bronze medal in the team competition, which is the first time that it existed in the Olympics, the team competition. And it's actually Israel's first ever medal in a team sport.
Yeah. And does that signify a change towards, maybe in Israel, there's a lot of good judo athletes? Or
no,
yeah, it does. In a way, yes. In judo, yes. It shows you that you have to have a strong, a lot of different good athletes in order to get to the point where you can win a medal, a group medal in judo. So this does show difference. Only in Beijing, we had only three athletes representing us in judo.
I think with judo it started, sorry, Sefi.
No,
I think it started almost by accident. Yael Arad won the silver medal 40 years. What was it? 92?
9 years ago.
Yeah. So, and after her, Smadja, and then Arik Zehevi, and then I think our Olympic committee felt okay, judo can be a thing in Israel. It started because even the team judo is not a team sport, right? They played individually and won again and again. So we took the medal, but so it's not a sport. It's not a team sport, and it will never be. And that's fine. We're good there. So let's bring more medals there.
Sure. All right. That makes sense. So do you see what we've talked about with Israeli sports represented in culture or in politics in Israel? So as a side note, just so everyone knows, the sports minister said before the games that the government would seek to invest in sports that found success at the Olympics, and the payment for gold medals is a crazy amount. It's 500,000 shekels compared to the $20,000 in Australia for the same thing. So clearly there's a lot of investment and time and money put into high achieving athletes. Is that a reflection of anything in politics or in culture? What does that tell us?
100%, yes. It's a very clear reflection of the way sports is seen by decision makers in Israel. As something that will bring glory and fame and pride to Israel, rather than something that achieves other purposes. I think that by focusing on results and achievements, we're missing the big story here. 1% in Israel, it's pretty high, this percentage, and it's 1% of kids who will start playing sports will actually become professional in any way. And that's a lot. I assure you that in Australia, it's significantly lower than that. That's only because Israel doesn't have a lot of kids who play sports in a structured way. So what happens with the other 99% who don't become professional? And what happens with the 99.9% of professionals who will never make it to anywhere near a medal? So I think that's very important to remember that. If you've mentioned in my introduction that one day I'll open a charity in Israel that will use sports as a social tool. I believe that we need to focus on the 99%. What are they going to get out of their sports? In Australia, for example, there are a few different programs. One of them is by Big Issue that uses soccer as a way to help homeless people, and many other programs. I think that's the way to use sports. And if at the end of it, someone becomes a professional, great. But that shouldn't be the aim.
And Motty, I
just want to agree. Speaking about prioritizing values, this is what Sefi just did. He's saying, correct me if I'm wrong, even if we're going to win one medal less next competition, next Olympics, but we'll have 2,000 hundreds more people just participating in a general sport, and because we believe it can give a lot to the youth, so let's do it. So again, winning in the Olympics is amazing. I was very happy to sing Hatikva. But if more people can, like the normal people that will never be professional, can gain more, that's more important.
Yeah, great to hear. So I'm just going to start talking about some individual, like specific examples that happened in the Olympics and ask for your guys' thoughts on them. So the first one is that Aya Tamir Regev, the gold medalist in gymnastics, in artistic gymnastics, I believe. He won gold, which was an absolutely incredible win for Israel. He is a Ukrainian Ole. His father is an Ole, I believe, his like parents, and he
made Aliyah himself as well.
Okay, cool.
But
he doesn't speak Hebrew or English, and he can't get married in Israel because he's not halakhically Jewish. But on the other hand, the cabinet, the Knesset was paused, a budget meeting was paused so that they could watch him win gold. So what's important to understand about this situation?
I think the parliament stopping a very important meeting finally, after 3 years having a budget, is extremely important, right? But that's classic Israeli. We're always doing it. The prime minister always calling them. It's, I think, a bit embarrassing for people like talking in the phone. I can't hear you, the president. I can't hear you. What's happening? Like me and my Savta, when we're like, it's funny, but it's also, this is us. We are one big family, exactly like me and my Savta. So that's not surprising. And I just want to say about Artyom, first of all, he didn't want, when people started to make a big deal out of the fact that he cannot get married in Israel, he shut down the discussion because he's very shy, but also because it's complex. I said at the beginning that I strongly believe that someone who represents us and happy to wear the uniform, I'll take it. Amazing. You want to be part, you're welcome. And I would say the same about Artyom. He has Israeli citizenship. Yes, personally, I think halachic Jews, it's important to follow halacha in terms of that. But in general, if someone is already Israeli citizen and he got like, he's part of us, he wanted to represent Israel, he was in the army, I'll be the last one to say he's part of us in any aspect. He made Aliyah not to be an Olympic athlete. He made Aliyah because I probably didn't have good enough life in Ukraine, and we welcomed him, and that's amazing. We should do this. But adding to this conversation, the fact that he cannot get married in Israel, it's a bigger discussion. And I think, yes, the halacha and being Jew is important in the state of Israel, and therefore it will affect what you can, what you cannot do. You still have all the rights. You still have the right to be a pro athlete, to get these 500,000 shekels, and it's amazing. I'll support it. But when it coming to our uniqueness and being the only country for the Jewish people, I'll say no. Like, we're still the only country for the Jewish people.
I obviously disagree. I think that this is a classic representation of something much deeper in our society. Both of the way, in many ways, we treat Olim in general, and of the way that we treat people who are not a part of the classic mainstream. And of course, about the monopoly of the Orthodox Judaism over anything that has to do with marriage and other things in Israel. I think that so Artem, he speaks Hebrew, but not good enough. So when he was 17 and he really struggled with Hebrew, he said, you know what, I won't even bother trying to complete my high school education. I'll just quit and focus on sports, because at that point, it was already really good. But think of how many people get to this position. They don't have the sport to save them. They just they quit school and that's it. They couldn't cope with Hebrew. And they'll get stuck in their ghetto for the rest of their life. They won't really be a part of society fully in many ways. And I think that we're doing a great job allowing people to come to Israel, but the next step, we're not as good. How do you actually support them when they're already there? The marriage question, first of all, even if there is a monopoly for orthodoxy over marriage in Israel, I got married in a reformed wedding in Israel. Officially, I can go to jail for 2 years for conducting a fake Jewish wedding in Israel because I didn't do it through the Rabbanut. He doesn't claim to be Jewish out in the Gulfiyat. His dad is Jewish, his mom is Christian. Basically what his mom said, it's okay. Don't let him get married in a Jewish wedding in Israel. Just let him get married in a civil marriage in Israel. But you're not allowed to do it as well. There are 300,000 people in Israel that are not allowed to get married through the Rabbanut, but also can't get married in a civil way. And I think we do it in the army as well. We have a lot of Olim who will go to the army. They will definitely be Jewish enough in order to go to the army. They'll be Jewish enough to die for us. They will not be Jewish enough to be buried in the Jewish cemetery next to their fellow soldiers. So I think this is something that teaches us a lot. And if I was Bennett, or if I was the president, I would feel really bad about calling someone like that and congratulating them wholeheartedly, knowing that I don't really care about what they have to say about other things. You can come and represent us in sports. You can win a gold medal for us. We won't do much more beyond that for you.
I think that this is bound to be a controversial topic. I think we all know that the existing conflict regarding civil versus religious marriage in Israel. And I think that that's something that I kind of want to put aside because that's a conversation for another day. But I think it was really interesting what you were saying about the experience in school of, of Olim, because you made me think I made Aliyah briefly to Israel when I was in year 7 and I went to school there. And I remember the experience of I know Hebrew and I was struggling, you know what I mean? And I remember, and it's interesting to juxtapose my experience with how learning Hebrew just in school is compared to, how I just think that that's a really interesting idea that I was having in my head. I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but it's something I was thinking about. And
I just want to say that this is not controversial at all. We can discuss the marriage issue. We're not going to do it now. But about the Olim issue, I 100 times agree. Yeah. And I want to say that I'm sure it's really, really hard to make Aliyah from Australia. But I believe
100
it's
times harder. Yeah.
Yeah, 100 times harder to make Aliyah from a struggle situation.
Absolutely.
From Ukraine, have nothing there. Let's try in Israel and then have all this hardship. And about that, yes, for sure, we need to do more Sefi. You can try and replace Bennett. You have the right haircut. We can compete each other. But about that, I'll support 100 times. We can and we should be better.
Absolutely. I think I wasn't trying to say that I had the same hardships as Altem because I obviously didn't.
No, but it's a very valid point that you raised.
Yeah.
But let's move on to another specific situation that happened. So with judo, the sport has always been a bit difficult for Israel because a lot of countries have demanded that their athletes withdraw before competing against Israel, refusing to recognize Israel as a country. How, as Israelis, you must have experienced that on the ground, in person. Was that a big deal? Did that feel big at the time, or did it feel like, there's anti-Semites everywhere? Like, what was the experience of living through that?
Sefi, you want me to go?
Go. I think we're in agreement about that.
Yeah, first of all, I think in general, it is a shame, and the International Olympic Committee have to do something about that. If you
one sec, maybe explain for a sec what happened in these Olympics.
So traditionally, since I don't know when, athletes for certain countries, it used to be Egypt and Tunis and Algeria and Iran, refuses to compete against Israeli judokas. And if they knew that they are going to, they withdraw the competition or waited to see if they have to, but they didn't compete. I think the Egyptians were different. They did compete, but never shake hands or did the
bowing.
Yeah, they never did it. So, and it was always a tension and always lots of criticism why the International Olympic Committee not just kicking them out of the competition because you're not injured or something. You're not competing because you're boycotting someone. So don't be part of the competition. I do have to say that I always smiled because it's nice to be in the part that willing to play, that willing to compete, that putting politics aside. And I would say even Moshit Yad LeShalom, like we want the peace and it shows that we are, I think, the good guys in the story. Let's put everything aside and compete. So I always enjoyed it, especially because against the Egyptian, when they did compete and didn't shake hands, we usually won. So it's even more fun to see us winning and then they are not shaking heads. Classic, you can find great photos of Sagi Muki going forwards and trying to shake hand and the Egyptian just running away because he don't want to. So this is about
Hello.
it.
Hi, Ben. I'm good. I'm just on
Sefi?
that Zoom.
Yeah, so it wasn't too much of a big deal. It just sort of felt like proud that Israel did the right thing.
It is a big deal. It should be a big deal, on the international level. But for me, I think it's also because we're quite good in judo. I was like, yeah, let's just win you on the court.
Sure.
But there was something interesting this time that a competitor from Saudi Arabia did compete. And it was very, very clear that it was a decision from high up in Saudi Arabia deciding that they do recognize Israel and they do agree to compete against Israel. It was very clear that the decision wasn't hers in any way.
So it seemed like she didn't want to compete, or?
99% of them want to compete against Israelis. It's their government or their Olympic committee who tells them that they can't compete.
Okay, understood.
One more thing very important. Saeed Mulai, he's an Iranian judoka. Great story, Behemet, Google it.
Yeah, it's a great story.
He used to represent Iran. And again, when he had to compete in Israeli judoka, he always withdrew. And a few years ago, he said that was enough. He was in a competition out of Iran. And he said, I'm not coming back to this country. And then he opened all the story that he is a good friend with Sagi Muki and he loves Israel. And he came to compete in a competition in Israel 2 years ago in Tel Aviv. And he's a great friend of Israel. He said he won the silver medal now. And he said, Israelis, it's also for you. Now we have nothing to do with us. He's Iranian. He represents Mongolia now. Nothing to do with us. But again, sport is above that. And when someone can put the politics aside, he's a great friend of us and a big supporter of Israel. So it's a great story.
Yeah, it is. It's a lovely story. I just am realizing the time and I'd like for the audience to also have some questions. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and Joe will forward them to us. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys because we have some other questions if nobody has anything to say, but just in case people want to share their discussion questions while we're waiting, I'd love to hear, while we're waiting for them, I would love to hear from you guys what you thought of the reaction to the judo competition and how the reaction to the judo competitors were doing quite badly, and apparently there was a lot of visceral, quite violent backlash against them. And then the minute they sort of seemed to be doing well, it seemed like everyone was really happy. So what have you guys got to say about that?
When you ask people now in Israel what they think about the judo, how they did in the Olympics, everyone loves them. They're national heroes. No one remembers that it was exactly the same people who slaughtered them individually just the days before. This new concept of the team competition in judo is just genius. You have six fights of 3 men, 3 women, and they fight someone from generally the same weight category, and then you need to get to 4 points, and then you win. So Israel started off winning against Italy. Then I think we lost to France.
Yeah.
Lost to France. Then we won against Brazil. Then we won against Russia. And it was very, very funny to see. You saw the Germans, you get 2 bronze medals in judo. The Germans also won a bronze medal. And they were like shaking hands, like smiling. The Israelis were standing there. None of them wore any masks, of course. They were standing and shouting. And we were like, I was sitting at home shouting like crazy. And all of my friends, everyone was watching it. And the celebration when Israel won this bronze medal was insane. And it's the same people who cried and that were trashed on social media just the day before. Became heroes the day after. And on that, there is a very famous song in Hebrew called En li rega dal o skandal o festival. I don't have a dull moment in Israel. It's either a scandal or a festival that I have. And it's so true for everything in Israel. Just like with COVID, we're either doing amazing or we're doing terrible. We're never in the middle. So same for the judo team.
Motty, do you have anything to add?
No, I just think it's part of being a family. And it's like all this extremism. I think Australians sometimes not struggling, but like this is the part of Israeliness that some people like what's happening here. This is the warm blood that we have. This is the connection that I truly feel family of Sefi, even though we are not. And like, so when we are in the morning, chas v'shalom, it's hard and we dip into it. And when it's happy, let's have a party, let's celebrate.
It's also interesting because, you see like, what's his name? Peter. No, the Australian who competed in the 800. Forgot his name. Who is a refugee from Somalia, from
Ball.
Peter Ball. Thank you. He was a candidate to win gold, and he finished 4th. And he goes to the interview, and the guy who interviews him is like, "Oh, good on you! You tried really hard. 4th place in the Olympics. Great achievement. Good on you." And in Israel, when someone finishes 4th, everyone's like, "Are you depressed? What happened?" and everyone's crying, like, explain what happens. How come you finished only 4th and not 3rd?
If you don't get the glory, it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
No.
Gotcha.
You better lose on the first round and not finish 4th in Israel.
I have a question for you. What effect has the entry of Jews from Eastern Europe had on the medal tally and the development in gymnastics? We know that Linoy Ashram won
Linoy Ashram
but she's not Eastern European.
Linoy Ashram's gold, apart from the 1984 Olympics where the entire Soviet bloc boycotted the games, Linoy Ashram was the first person to win gold in any rhythmic gymnastic performance in the Olympic history who is not from the former Soviet country.
Yeah.
First one. She's her parents are Yemenites from Rishon LeZion. Her coach even isn't Russian. She's simply not Russian. She said in an interview that she goes to competitions and people are calling her Lina because they think that there must be a mistake there. How come you're not Russian?
What's the influence of the Eastern European Aliyah then?
I think without this Aliyah, Linoy Ashram wouldn't won a medal. So yes, she is not by herself from Eastern Europe, but this is what brought into Israel all this culture and all these options for her, even though she and her coach are not. And it allows her to shine. And by the way, I think, again, because I'm an educator, this is what I'm interested in. She's in all the interviews, Linoy Ashram said, I was never the best in the class. I was never good enough. And she just worked so hard. And I think, I don't know, it's giving a good lesson for all of us.
Also something that huge thing that the Aliyot from Eastern Europe gave us is amazing coaches on the highest level that came. And even if the people they're coaching are not Russians themselves necessarily,
coached by Russians.
They're the coaches. Almost all the coaches in Israeli track and field are from the former Soviet Union. When you look at volleyball and handball and so many other professions, we have great coaches who came from the former Soviet Union. So yeah, I think a huge impact that they brought to us. It's one of those things where people simply don't speak about it enough. Just like in high tech, people don't speak enough about the fact that it was the Russian and the former Soviet Union aliyot that made a big change into Israeli high tech. Same in sports.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I have one last question, I believe, unless anyone else has any questions to share. This question is a bit long, so I'm going to read it out. In terms of Australia, there have been multiple legislations and operations used in order to enhance sporting success at an elite international level. Winning Edge 2012 to 2021, but was cut off as a failure of 2017 for new legislation of Sport 2030. I'm not sure what those words mean, but I hope that meant something to you guys. These were used to enhance sport in Australia at an elite level, and there has been a strong lack of care for grassroots sports in Australia, other than the sports rorts where the Liberal Party were funding grassroots organizations in specific electorates to get votes. How do you compare this with Israeli municipality / Hilly-Trope and the future legislation to aid the future of Israeli sport?
So I think it's a very good question, and we can draw a lot of similarities. So in Israel, there is a body under the Olympic committee called Yechida L'Sport AZYC. It's kind of the unit for competitive sports or like kind of elite sports. It was formed, I think, in 1987, and almost constantly started bringing the results. And basically what they do is that they will take the best athletes in Israel and they will take them to the next level. Okay? But what they don't do, and they're very good at it, really, really good at it. What they don't do is they don't grow the athletes. They don't work on the grassroots level. The grassroots level belongs to the Ministry of Sports, belongs to the municipalities, belongs to the different sporting associations. And that's where we're lacking a lot, in my opinion, both in order to, so AZYC, who won a medal in judo in 2004 and is like one of the most favorite people in Israel. He always says, the only reason why I started in judo was because my neighbor was a judo coach. And he told me, hey, do you want to come to try judo? That's the only reason he got to judo. Not because someone checked, are you actually a good fit for judo? Not anything like that. You want to imagine an Israeli kid who goes to a normal school will have on average about an hour and a half of sports a week. That's it.
Sefi, my kids going to the school here and it's the same. They have 1 or 2 lessons a week.
You know what's the big difference? That 50% of Australian kids go into team sports, not just any sport, into team sports, at least once a week. There's 50% of Australian kids. And in Israel, this number is around 12%. That's the huge difference. Now, what they're missing is not just the chance. Who knows? They might be like potentially a world champion in badminton, and we don't know that. That's one thing that we're missing. The second thing that we're missing is all the values. You get so much out of sports. You learn how to lose in sports. It's so important for life to know how to lose. To know, say, we lost, and it's actually my fault. I need to go and do my homework. It was my fault that we lost because I missed the last shot.
I just wanted to say that I think on a very basic level, all kinds of sports exist. In the Shomron, I grew up in the Shomron in a small settlement. You wouldn't think there is a sport over there. And I joined soccer and basketball and judo and tennis, like a lot. It was never a goal to try and be professional. It was good because it's a great hobby, because you can gain a lot and sport can give you a lot, not because it can be your career. And I think this is where I'll make the distinction. Every kid in Israel, I think almost everyone will go even after school and do soccer and do tennis and do even swimming, but not because he might he can be a pro one day just because it's good, it's fun, and then go to uni and find yourself a job. Yeah, this is where I draw the line.
Fair enough. Unfortunately, we're just running out of time. So I'd love to hear any final remarks from you guys. Anything you'd like to finish off by saying?
I would just say that, first of all, it's a great pleasure. I know that for both Motty and I, this is probably by far the most entertaining and fun event we'll do here. I think that sports is a great tool, not just to bring people together and to gain values, and that's why maybe one day you'll hear from me about my charity. I'll ask for some donations, but also because we can learn so much from sports about other things, and that's kind of what we try to bring today, to learn about the Israeli society through sports. So that's for organizing.
Motty?
Yeah, I just want to say if the baseball team became more connected to Israel through the Olympics, I don't mind. And if we all becoming more connected to Israeli society or to what's happening in Israel because of the Olympics, let's have Olympics every year. It's all here to serve the better and a higher goal, I think. Sport is amazing. I'm almost addicted, as I said, but I still prioritizing.
Motty, you are addicted.
Yeah, I'm addicted. Okay, fine. My wife will agree. But and I will still say that it's amazing, but it's here to serve a better and a more important goal, which we all sitting together here because we are under whatever, Zionism Victoria or AZYC, or this is what connected us. And if sport is another tool to achieve this connection and togetherness, amazing, why not? So I thank you for joining us. I had a real pleasure.
I did too. It was really lovely to speak to you both. And I'm going to pass back to Joey now.
Cool. Thank you, guys. A really awesome, fruitful discussion and one that I thoroughly enjoyed as well. Thank you, Aya, for hosting and for moderating tonight. And of course, thank you to Sefi and thank you to Motty for being our little guinea pigs and discussing Israel and the Olympics in what was, as I've said, an amazing discussion. We're going to be uploading this video to our YouTube and our Facebook page probably on Thursday, and if not on Thursday, probably sometime earlier next week. So you'll be able to catch it again. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to Zionism Victoria and AZYC for putting this on. Good night, everybody.
Toda rabba. Good night.